I'm Karen Swain. Cyrus Kirkpatrick and I have put together a book called Awakened by Death, Stories of Transformation. It is 12 personal stories of people's lives and how their lives have been transformed through experiencing the death experience. So this could be either the death of a loved one, like a parent or a child, or even their own death. There are quite a few authors in the book, 2, 3, 4 authors who have had NDEs, and Cyrus and Garnet have had OBEs, out-of-body experiences. And so experiencing these brushes with death, either through the death of a loved one or their own experience, they've had these spiritual awakenings and they've completely transformed their lives, and then go on to transform the lives of many others. Like every author in the book is now a teacher. Cyrus was just telling me on my show the other day that he's not only teaching in this experience, in this third dimensional physical earth experience, he's also teaching in the second earth, which is the name of his chapter, in another astral realm. He's getting people together and getting them to share their experiences, and he's teaching there. So he's teaching everywhere. I think maybe a lot of us who are teachers here on earth are teaching in other realms. We might not be aware of it, but Cyrus tends to be aware of it. So the reason I started the book was many years ago, when I was sitting on the couch struggling with how I was going to make a difference in the world. I thought about what causes the most amount of pain in our world. What do people get the most upset about? And what they get the most upset about is death. It's like when they have experienced the death of someone they love. And the perception is, I've lost someone. I can't ever see them again. I'll never see them again. And that tends to be the thought that creates the most amount of suffering on our planet. So I thought I really wanted to address that suffering. And I wrote my book. I was having a chat to my guides. That's another story, how I got connected to them. It was through my experience going through the death of my mother and asking many questions. You know, what'll I write about? And they said, write what you know. And what I knew was that Mum died when I was 16, and many of my best friend committed suicide. Another good friend of mine died of thalidomide related illnesses. Like a lot of the people that I loved the most, that were really close to me, had transitioned from this world. And all of them came to tell me that they didn't die. Like I had dream after dream after dream, waking experiences as well as sleeping experiences. And in every experience, they said, you know, I'm not dead, don't you? You know, you don't die. And so when my guide said, write about what you know, that's what I knew. So I wrote my book called Return to Love, which is my experiences and then a few others. And then we expanded on that in this book called Awakened by Death. So from my show, I've got a podcast radio show, I've noticed that the most amount of YouTube hits that we get are the people that are talking about death or near-death experiences. So I figured that there are a lot of people out there wanting to understand, you know, what happens when we die, or they're grieving and they're wanting to know how to get over their grief, or can I ever see my loved one again? Can I communicate with them? Can I speak with them? Is there life after death? So I wanted to address that. I wanted to address those questions. And so I put together the 12 stories from people that have been on my show. Cyrus is one of them, and my story, talking about how we've had these spiritual awakenings through the death experience. So obviously Mum dies when I'm 16. I had watched her really suffer for the last 4 years of her life. She suffered terribly because she had these young children. So she was really resisting dying. And when she left this world, I just kept asking, well, where did she go? And if she actually went somewhere, like, well, where do we come from? If we go somewhere, we've come from somewhere. And those questions just created a momentum, and I just kept asking more and more and more questions. So if we come from someone, then what are we doing here? And if we're here, like, how do we make our life more healthy? Because I watch Mum really sick. You know, how can we enjoy our life? How can we be happier? How can we not get sick? And that just took me on my spiritual path. And now I'm in my, mid to late 50s, and I have had a lot of answers. And so I wanted to share other people's answers as well, what they've discovered through their experiences. So we do that on the show, and we're doing this in the book. The book has expanded on a lot of the conversations I've had on the show, and it's put them all together so that it takes people on a journey. So you start with mine, and mine's just talking about communication with loved ones through dreams, you know, like what mum came to show me when I was young, what she was saying to me in my dreams, and experiences I had with other friends, like my girlfriend who died when she was in her 30s, and how she came to show me about how there's no such thing as death. You know, that she could go. We were talking about it the other day. I had an astral experience with her where I'm saying, but why can I feel you? Why can I touch you when I'm not in a body? I thought that when you're not in a body, you know, you're like a spirit and you can't sort of feel anything with your fingers. And yet I was having this visceral experience of hugging her and feeling the flesh of her body. And I knew I wasn't in my body. So we start off like that. And then we go into more sort of out there, difficult sort of experiences to understand if you're just beginning this journey. So it takes people on a journey through dreams to near-death experiences to overcoming grief and loss, making a choice to feel happy and be a person who makes a difference in this world, even though you've gone through horrific, horrifying things. Like Dave Byron's chapter is about the death of his daughter, who was blown up in the Bali bombings in 2000. Remember that? His 13-year-old was killed in the Bali bombings. And, you know, I found Dave because I live in Coogee and there's a memorial up the road, and I went to one of the memorial. They have every year, they have a talk. And Dave was one of the parents who was there talking about his loss, and he was so positive and such a happy person. And I thought, I need to meet this man. I need to know what this man knows. And I had him on my radio show, and then I invited him over to the house and I recorded his story. He told me he had never really gone into detail about his story, and he told me blow by blow every detail of what happened, which was pretty horrific. And Cyrus and I were debating, do we put all that in the book? You know, do we put all the gory details in the book? And we both decided, yes, we're going to put it in the book, because people really can see that you can go through horrific things and still be a really happy, joyous, loving person who makes a difference in this world. And Dave is definitely one of those people. So it takes people on a journey from deliberate creation to life after life, to what we can experience being in body, out of body at the same time. There's so many stories and diversity in the book. And yeah, we love it. I love it. I hope other people do too. We've just popped it up on Amazon, and we're starting to get people's reviews in. I was just chatting to someone on Cyrus's group on Facebook, Afterlife Topics, and she was saying how much she loved it, and we were chatting about that. So it's out there doing its job in the world. It's out there to enlighten people, to help people overcome grief, to expand their awareness of who they are while they're in the body, and to enlighten people, lighten up humanity. So it's out there doing its job.
I'm Cyrus, and I was the editor of Awakened by Death. And I have a chapter toward the end of the book called The Second Earth. And this relates to many of my own experiences with astral projection, astral travel, and communication with deceased loved ones. And in this chapter, I go into a lot of details that I didn't go into in my book, Understanding Life After Death. I talk a lot about things that have happened since then with members of my family who have passed away, as well as astral experiences that I've had that have been very profound. And I also talk about kind of an overarching theme, which is a place in this afterlife dimension that I commonly go to, which kind of an astral equivalent to the lives we lead here, but there's many rules that are a bit different. There's different types of physics, I suppose, that people have. You can alter things with your thoughts, and you can sometimes you can travel around using your mind. A lot of those, very kind of higher density abilities that we go into when we talk about the specifics of the afterlife dimension. And so my chapter is about out-of-body experiences and being able to go to those types of places yourself without having to be close to death. That anybody with enough practice, I believe, can eventually attain an experience like that. And personally, I've been able to see all kinds of really interesting places, which are in some ways almost like a carbon copy of this world, because I've been to astral equivalents of major cities like London or Chicago, but it's kind of like how life continues on that side, which is something that I find very, very fascinating. And as Karen was saying, it is a little bit like a deeper topic, because the book, it shifts around from, I suppose, a more basic understanding of like death and the dying process and grief and spiritual experiences. Then it kind of builds up into these much more profound topics, which we didn't really want people to have to attempt to digest at the very beginning. So kind of as you begin in this book, we talk more about, like, for instance, Sandra Champlain's chapter is about almost like the very fundamentals of like how we don't die, and it's possible to have these different types of spiritual experiences, and her own experiences as starting off as a skeptic. We also have Nancy's chapter, which was hit by a truck when she was an atheist, and so she had a near-death experience, and then the NDE transformed her own opinions coming from perspective as an atheist, and we think that's something that readers will be able to relate to. And then it keeps going into, as I said, more and more profound topics that may require a little bit more digestion to fully understand. And that's kind of how we wanted to frame the book, because it's difficult if you hit somebody with very complex subjects right at the beginning. So kind of as you go in the book, it becomes more and more complex about these metaphysical subjects. But ultimately, the overlying goal of the book is, I believe, to help people relieve the grief and anxiety and fear that comes with the subject of death. That is has always been my primary goal with all of this, is to help people lead lives that are without so much fear and anxiety.